In the depths of despair, I found myself in a darkness I never imagined possible, a sack over my head, my life reduced to a mere $2 transaction. As fear gripped my heart, it was a simple act of defiance that changed everything. I whispered my name. The man holding my fate in his hands paused, and in that fleeting moment, something extraordinary happened. From the depths of bondage, a thread of hope began to weave its way into my life, leading to an unexpected proposal that would forever alter my identity and my destiny. Join me on this journey of survival, love, and the quest for freedom. If my story resonates with you, I invite you to like and subscribe for more heartfelt revelations. The air was thick with despair, the kind that clings to you like a shroud, wrapping around your thoughts and squeezing the breath from your lungs. I could barely remember what day it was, the hours merging into each other under the oppressive weight of darkness. The only light I knew was the faint glow of a fractured bulb that hung from the ceiling, its flickering pulse mimicking the erratic beat of my heart. I was in a room that felt more like a tomb than anything else. 4 concrete walls, a single rickety chair, and the faintest scent of mold that permeated the air. My wrists bore the raw marks of the ropes that had bound me, a cruel reminder of my captivity. But the most haunting aspect of this place was the silence. It pressed down on me heavily, as if swallowing my cries before they could ever reach the walls. Each sound was amplified in the stillness, a rat skittering across the floor, the distant echo of voices, the heavy thud of footsteps approaching my door. I sat in that chair, my heart racing at each footfall, each moment feeling as if it could be my last. I had no way of knowing what awaited me beyond this room. The unknown was a monstrous figure that lurked in the shadows, teasing me with 1,000 potential fates. I longed for escape, for freedom, for anything that would drown out the suffocating sense of hopelessness that clung to me. I was more than just a lost girl. I was a whisper of a life that could have been, snatched away like a fragile dream before dawn broke. Then the door creaked open. I held my breath, the sudden influx of light momentarily blinding me. A figure emerged, and despite the sack over my head, I could sense the weight of his presence. I was terrified, and yet a part of me was curious, desperate to know who had the power to decide my fate. Words bounced around my mind, frantic thoughts of escape, but I kept my lips sealed. For all I knew, this was the end of my story, and I didn't want it to end with me begging for mercy. I could taste the bitterness of fear, the sharp tang of desperation that filled my mouth like metal. He approached, his footsteps echoing loudly in my mind. I felt his eyes on me, surveying what remained of my spirit, and without thinking, I lifted my chin defiantly. I was not just a number, a price tag, an object to be traded. I wanted to scream my existence, to remind him that I was still alive within this shell. But the sack over my head muffled my voice, like a shackle that refused to let it escape. Then came the moment that shifted the gravity of my world. In one swift motion he pulled the sack off, and with it, the veil between who I was and who I had become was lifted, if only momentarily. "What's your name?" he asked, the words dripping with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. I hesitated, searching for the remnants of myself buried deep beneath the layers of fear and shame that had been heaped upon me. I took a shaky breath, feeling the name roll off my tongue like a lifeline. "It's Sarah." The sound of my own name felt foreign, yet it echoed with the memory of laughter, dreams, and less complicated days. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, a glimmer of hope sparked within me. My identity was a flame that refused to be snuffed out. His response was unexpected. He didn't recoil or respond with contempt. Instead, there was a flicker of something else in his gaze. Intrigue, perhaps. "Sarah," he repeated, as if tasting it, and then he dropped to one knee before me. My heart jolted at the sight, raw confusion flooding through me. "I want to marry you." I hadn't anticipated this twist, this bizarre, surreal declaration that twisted the very fabric of my reality. Was this a ploy, a cruel joke, or was it a desperate act of sincerity? The ground beneath me felt unsteady, and all I could do was stare into his eyes, searching for a truth that felt impossible to grasp. His eyes were a murky shade of green, swirling like a stormy sea. They carried a darkness that spoke of desperation, yet within that turmoil lay a flicker of something more. Compassion, maybe? It was hard to reconcile the conflicting emotions in his gaze as he knelt before me, one hand resting on the worn floor, the other raised in a gesture that felt both tender and terrifying. A pulse of electricity shot through me, the sudden shift from fear to curiosity igniting a spark I thought had long extinguished. He was rugged, with rough stubble grazing his jawline and hair that fell haphazardly over his forehead. He looked both intimidating and strangely vulnerable, like a wild thing caught in a net. I was taken aback by how close he was. I could see the subtle lines that etched his face, each one a testament to battles fought, both internal and external. His clothes were nondescript, a plain black t-shirt and cargo pants that seemed to have seen better days. But it was his hands that captivated me, calloused, strong yet cautious as they hovered a mere breath away from my own. I felt as if he were not only touching my present self, but reaching deep into the shadows of my past, where I was still the girl who dreamed, who laughed, who believed in possibilities outside of these grim walls. Every moment felt suspended in time, and I was mesmerized by this unexpected connection. "Marry me," the words fell from his lips with an unexpected weight, reverberating in the cavern of my heart. I could see the sincerity, the yearning lurking in the depths of his eyes. But who was I to him? I was a prisoner, a commodity to be traded. Yet now I stood before this man as something different, something that held the potential for a life I had nearly forgotten existed. How could he see me as more than a victim? I was raw, stripped down to my essence, and yet his gaze held promise, as if he saw beyond the scars and remnants of this dark chapter. The absurdity of the moment swept over me like a tide, crashing against my defenses. Marry him, the words echoed in my brain, filling the silence with confusion and a twinge of something I dared not label. I was still reeling from the revelation of my own name, the reminder of who I once was, and now this proposal turned my world on its head. I was not ready to accept his offer, not yet, but I found myself grappling with the allure of a choice I had never imagined I might possess. Sitting there, trapped in that rickety chair, I felt a pull towards something that could be beautiful, something that thrived in the midst of chaos. What was this strange feeling stirring inside of me? Longing, hope? Could it be possible that I could forge a new path away from darkness, even through this peculiar, tangled web he was weaving? I searched his face for answers, but found only questions reflected back at me, waiting for my response, as tentative as a moth approaching a flame. As I lingered in the silence, the weight of my situation came crashing back. I was still a captive, still bound by the reality of my circumstances. But amidst that reality, I felt the flicker of a new identity emerging. For the first time, I sensed the power of my own voice beginning to unfurl, fueled by the strange idea that perhaps, just perhaps, I could redefine my fate. I didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, I felt an awakening deep within me, a whisper of resilience and a yearning to reclaim what had been stolen, to step into a world where I could finally be seen. The silence that enveloped us felt alive, pulsating with an intensity that both terrified and fascinated me. I stared into his eyes, searching for a glimmer of anything: anger, regret, malice. But all I found was an impenetrable storm of emotions. The proposal hung in the air like a fragile thread, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Despite my fear, a part of me craved connection, the glimmer of hope he had ignited just by uttering my name. But just as quickly, doubt sank its claws into me, reminding me of the darkness that marred my existence. He reached out, his calloused fingers brushing against the skin of my wrist, feathery light, yet electric. I flinched at first, the scars of restraint still fresh in my mind, but his touch was gentle, almost reverent. It was a strange contradiction, this man, a possible captor, extending a hand that seemed to understand the depths of my pain. My heart raced as I felt the warmth of his palm seep into me, slowly melting the icy fortress I had constructed around my heart. Was this compassion or some cruel game? I couldn't tell, but a part of me was desperate to believe it was the former. "I'm sorry for your suffering," he said, his voice low and raw, each word tangling with the air between us. It was an apology, simple yet profound, and it took me aback. I had envisioned my captor as a monstrous figure devoid of humanity, someone who reveled in my pain and stripped me of my identity. But here he was, kneeling before me, as if willing to confront the consequences of his actions. His vulnerability startled me. The rough edges of his exterior clashed with the tenderness in his voice. In that moment, I began to see him not just as a shadow looming over my life, but as a complex being, shaped by circumstances just as I had been. I found myself wanting to respond, to allow him a glimpse into the soul he had unwittingly reached. Struggling against the fear lodged in my throat, I whispered, "I didn't choose this." The words spilled out, raw and unrefined. They were my truth. A declaration of my shattered identity that resonated with the ache in my chest. He met my gaze, and for a heartbeat, the world around us faded, leaving just the two of us suspended in a moment that felt fragile yet infinite. His hand lingered on my wrist, and with a quiet resolve he said, "I can help you, not in the way you think, but in a way that's real." There was a sincerity in his eyes that ignited a spark of intrigue within me. Could this be a chance for something more than just escape? A chance to rebuild my life, my identity, from the ashes of what had been? My heart thudded beneath my ribs, each beat echoing the weight of his words. In a twisted way, my situation had led me to this moment, standing on the precipice of an unexpected choice. As his fingers slipped away, I felt an unbearable longing to cling to the connection we had forged, however tenuous it was. In that desolate room, among concrete walls and the suffocating air, we were two lost souls searching for light. He was here, offering me a glimmer of humanity in a world that had been devoid of it, and for the first time in ages, I felt the stirrings of possibility wash over me like a balm. Maybe he wasn't just the monster I had imagined, but a person navigating his own labyrinth of life. Time seemed to stretch, seconds morphing into infinity as we held each other's gazes, the weight of so many unspoken words hanging heavily in the air. In that moment, the darkness that had swallowed me whole began to recede, unveiling a sliver of hope. I may have entered this room with shackles, but perhaps, just perhaps, I could leave with something far more powerful than I had ever known. As the flickering bulb illuminated his face and shadows danced around us, I found strength in my vulnerability, a yearning to rewrite my destiny. I was still Sarah, after all, a name that ignited the fire within me, a name that deserved a story worth telling. The weight of his proposal hung heavily between us, and I felt as if the air had thickened, wrapping around my throat like a noose. I searched for the right words, for the clarity that seemed to slip through my fingers like grains of sand. My heart raced, each beat a reminder of my fractured existence, an echo of the girl I had once been before this nightmare consumed me. I wanted to scream, to yell at him for the absurdity of it all, but instead I found myself caught in a web of confusion and doubt, the remnants of fear and hope intertwining like a chaotic dance. He knelt there, waiting for my response, and I could see the flicker of vulnerability in his eyes, a desire for connection that mirrored my own. But how could I trust him? How could I look past the monster I had conjured in my mind, the figment of cruelty and darkness that had loomed over me for so long? The profound irony twisted my insides like a knife. Here was my captor, my tormentor, offering me a lifeline wrapped in a proposal. Could love bloom in a place where despair had reigned supreme? Or was it merely a cruel trick of fate, a final jest of this twisted universe? As I stared at him, the shadows danced across his face, creating a mosaic of light and dark that mirrored my own turbulent emotions. I had dreamed of love, of being swept away by a force that would make the world feel lighter. Yet how could I reconcile those dreams with the reality of my captivity? I felt raw and exposed, stripped of the layers that once protected my heart. The girl who dared to dream was buried beneath fear, and here I was, standing at the crossroads of my own identity. Would I surrender to the chaos, or dare to take a step toward a fragile possibility? The silence stretched between us, thick with the weight of unspoken fears, and I could feel the familiar grip of panic tightening around my lungs. I was terrified of the very act of saying yes. It felt like a leap into the abyss, a betrayal of the girl who had fought so hard to survive. Beneath this table of forced circumstance was a yearning to find a way back to myself, to reclaim the passion and dreams that had been stolen. But could marrying him offer me a chance at that reclamation? I knew I wasn't just saying yes to a man. I was saying yes to a future, one that could very well be another layer of shackles. The moments passed like minutes, and it was as if the world had condensed to just the two of us, locked in this heavy glance. I wanted to scream, to break the silence with the harsh reality of my doubt, but he held me in place. I could feel my pulse throbbing in my veins, and as I breathed in deeply, I longed for clarity. Could I trust this man with my heart, with a new beginning? The battle waged within me, the clashing currents of fear and something dangerously potent, a flicker of hope. Finally, I exhaled slowly, the breath escaping me like a whispered confession. "Why me?" I questioned, my voice trembling as I sought the hidden truth behind his intentions. "Why would you want to marry someone like me?" The words felt heavy on my tongue, weighted by grief and uncertainty. I needed to know if he was serious, if he could see beyond the tattered remnants of my existence. I was still Sarah, yes, but I was also a ghost of my former self, haunted by the shadows of what had been and terrified of what could come. Could love and hope bloom in such barren soil? In that moment, as I searched his stormy green eyes, I found myself teetering on the edge of a precipice, desperate to be swept away into something real, something that could finally anchor the pieces of my fractured soul. His question hung in the air, each word weighted with the gravity of my truth. I felt a tightness in my chest, as if the world around me had narrowed to this moment, and all I could hear was the rhythm of my own heart pounding. Why me? It was a simple question that pierced through the layers of my fear, a question that demanded an answer I wasn't ready to face. Around us, the walls felt like they were closing in, forming a prison not made of concrete, but of expectation. His hope was a fragile thread that intertwined with my despair, creating a tapestry of emotions that was both beautiful and terrifying. I searched his face for clarity, for any hint of deception that would justify the skepticism dancing in my mind. But what I found was surprising, a softness that belied the hardened exterior of a man I had imagined as a monster. In those murky green eyes swirled a depth of emotion that mirrored my own unspoken pain. I could see it now, the way vulnerability coursed through him, radiating an unsteady mix of longing and fear, as if he too was standing at the brink of an abyss. It felt almost absurd. Here we were, two broken souls tangled in a web of circumstance, yet longing for connection amidst the wreckage. "I don't know," he replied, his voice rasping with sincerity, the weight of my questions striking him just as it had struck me. "You're different, you're strong. Not many would have your fire after all this." He gestured to the dark corners of our grim surroundings, and I felt the flicker within me ignite. The way he spoke my truth, the way he saw me beyond the chains and shadows, cracked open something inside, a door that I had long kept shut, locked tight against despair. It was a revelation that sent shivers through my spine, igniting a strange sense of warmth in the midst of cold reality. Perhaps he wasn't just a captor, perhaps he was the mirror reflecting my hidden resilience. As I gazed at him, the absurdity of the situation washed over me. I was sitting in a rickety chair, bound in a life I hadn't chosen, and yet here was this man, offering not just a proposal, but a sliver of hope. Love had always felt like a distant dream, an idea wrapped in happiness and laughter, far removed from the darkness that had enveloped my life. But as I sat there, attempting to reconcile this strange connection blooming between us, I felt a desperate longing stirring deep within. Could we both be seeking redemption in each other? The possibility flickered like a flame, fragile yet undeniably present. I took a shaky breath, feeling the weight of my own vulnerability pressing against my heart. "I don't know if I can trust you," I admitted, my voice trembling, quaking under the rawness of my emotions. It was the truth, a painful admission that exposed layers of fear and doubt that I had buried for far too long. In that moment I felt naked, stripped of the armor I had fought so hard to build. He had pierced through my defenses, and now the reality of my situation felt overwhelming yet liberating. I was tired of pretending, tired of pushing away the glimmers of connection that threatened to expose me. "I understand," he replied softly, his gaze unflinching, and in that moment I caught a glimpse of the man beneath the rough edges. There was no anger, no resentment in his response, just a quiet acceptance of my truth. I marveled at the tenderness in his voice, the gentle intensity that radiated from him like a beacon in the darkness. It struck me how vulnerable he was, kneeling before me, stripped of the persona he wore outside this room, revealing a man who was willing to put his own heart on the line in the name of something inexplicably more. In that silence, amidst the shadows, I realized I was no longer merely a victim. I was a survivor, capable of reclaiming my narrative. His offer rippled through me like a breath of fresh air, hinting at a possibility where two lost souls could carve out a space to heal together. Perhaps there was more to this story than just chains and captivity. Perhaps it was a chance to step into the light I had long forgotten existed. As I sat there, grappling with emotions that tangled like ivy around my heart, I found myself taking a step towards the unknown, ready to embrace the delicate flicker of hope that dared to blossom. I was still Sarah, despite everything. And maybe, just maybe, my name held the power to forge a new destiny. As the silence stretched between us, the air thick with unresolved emotions, something shifted within him. His brow furrowed, as if he was grappling with the weight of his own vulnerability, and then, quite unexpectedly, he reached out again. This time, it was not a hesitant brush of fingers. It was a bold, gentle grasp of my hands, which were still trembling in my lap. I gasped at the contact, warmth flooding in where fear had once held court. It was as if he was inviting me to step beyond the prison of my own despair, offering a connection forged in shared pain and tenuous hope. His touch sent ripples of electricity through my body, igniting every nerve ending with an intensity I hadn't felt in what seemed like a lifetime. My breath hitched in my throat as I stared into his eyes, which were now lit with a fierce determination that made my heart race. It wasn't just a gesture, it was a lifeline. In that moment, I felt the weight of my shackles begin to dissipate. Not entirely. I was still a prisoner in this room, but the chains of self-doubt and fear that had wrapped around my heart were beginning to loosen. He was reaching out, not just for my hands, but for my very spirit, and I could feel the remnants of my identity flickering back to life. "I promise," he said, his voice steady, yet laced with an urgency that resonated deep within me. "I won't let you go. Not like this." It was as if he had pulled me back from the edge of an emotional abyss, offering me a thread of possibility woven with sincerity. His gaze bore into mine, raw and earnest, and I felt as though he could see the bruised and battered remnants of who I was. Not just a captive, but a soul longing to be seen, to be cherished. The sincerity of his vow echoed in my mind like a mantra, repeating the promise of safety, of sanctuary. It was a promise I had never thought to hear in a place so steeped in darkness. The tenderness of his grip seemed to anchor me, tethering my scattered thoughts to a new reality that pulsed with the rhythm of possibility. I could feel the walls around me begin to fade, the concrete transformed into something less suffocating, more malleable. There was an unspeakable vulnerability in him, a willingness to connect that sent shivers down my spine. In his touch, I felt a response igniting within me, a flicker of hope intertwined so tightly with fear, yet somehow more powerful than either. His fingers tightened around mine, a silent promise that spoke volumes louder than words. "You deserve so much more than this," he whispered, and the weight of his words clung to the air like an ethereal mist. Those simple syllables brought tears to my eyes, unbidden and heavy. It was the first time anyone had painted my existence in shades of worth, had spoken words that resonated with the truth I'd buried deep within. Did I really deserve more? The question spiraled through me, the flicker of self-belief igniting a fire I thought had long extinguished. In that fleeting moment, surrounded by despair, it was a gesture, that gentle, unwavering hold of my hands, that changed everything. It was an affirmation of my existence, a reminder that I was still Sarah, still worthy of love, and still capable of hope. As I stared into his eyes, I realized that this could be the beginning of something extraordinary, an unlikely partnership in a world that had tried to reduce me to a number, a price tag. Perhaps this was my chance to reclaim my narrative, to rewrite the story bound within me, with every flickering ember of light that dared to shine through the shadows. A shiver ran through me, and in that moment, as he held my hands with such earnestness, a memory surfaced, a traumatic echo from a past I had fought so hard to suppress. I was a little girl then, perhaps 8 or 9, standing in a sun-drenched field of wildflowers, the laughter of my friends dancing around me like the gentle breeze. We had just finished playing, the sunlight wrapping us in a warm embrace, and I remember the way we would twirl, chasing one another, lost in the innocence of childhood. Then, out of nowhere, the world turned dark. A man emerged from the edge of the woods, his shadow stretching long and ominous against the backdrop of my blissful day. I can still recall the way the laughter faded in an instant, replaced by a chilling stillness that seeped into my bones, making me freeze in place. My friends ran. I, on the other hand, stood like a deer caught in headlights, a naive soul unsure of the approaching danger. The man's eyes were a stormy grey, chilling and devoid of kindness. With a swift motion, he grabbed my wrist, dragging me away from the only world I knew, where laughter once reigned. As he pulled me into the dark thicket, I screamed, cried, begged him to let me go. But my voice was swallowed by the trees, a testament to my powerlessness. I felt the reality of helplessness curl around me tighter than any noose, the taste of fear so sharp on my tongue I feared I might choke on it. The cries of my friends faded into nothingness, leaving only the echo of my own despair. It was in that moment, when my innocence crumbled beneath the weight of cruelty, that I lost a part of myself. The girl who believed the world was good, that love was unconditional, and that laughter would never fade. I never returned to that field, the flowers wilting in my memory as I was consumed by a new life woven with darkness. That moment became a haunting refrain, a reminder that fear could strike at any time, that my laughter could be silenced, and that I could be taken anywhere, stripped of agency and identity. Time blurred and folded in on itself, and I became a shadow of the girl who twirled in that field, lost in a maze of survival, where love felt like a distant memory. Each new trauma layered upon the last, building walls around my heart that were fortified by years of despair and disillusionment. But now, as I sat in this dim room, ensnared by the weight of my captor's gaze, I realized how profoundly impactful those memories were. They shaped me, yes, but they no longer had to define me. The ashes of my past were rising, and in their wake, I felt a flicker of resilience rekindling within me. The man kneeling before me, with his haunted eyes and trembling sincerity, was no longer just a shadow of fear. He was an invitation to reclaim what was rightfully mine, my identity, my voice, my right to exist and choose. I didn't want to be taken then, I whispered, recalling the innocence I had lost and the pain that had followed me like a haunting spectre. I was scared, alone. I looked deeply into his eyes, feeling an unspoken connection forming as I bared my soul to him. But I won't be that girl anymore. If you want to marry me, you have to understand that I'm fighting to find myself again. Not just for you or this moment, but for me. The declaration hung heavy in the air, and as his grip tightened around my hands, I felt the stirrings of hope once more. Maybe love could take root again, even in the most barren soil. Perhaps I could learn to trust again, not just him, but myself. With every flicker of possibility, I began to rewrite my story. As I stared into his eyes, a flicker of hope began to blossom, yet it was quickly overshadowed by a spiraling sense of uncertainty. His words, so earnest and profound, stirred something deep within me. But beneath that, I felt the weight of every scar I wore. I wanted to believe in the possibility he was offering, to embrace the notion of partnership amid the chaos, but the fear of rejection clawed at my insides, whispering dark thoughts of what could go wrong. My heart ached for connection, yet the remnants of betrayal still clung to me like shadows in the night, weaving a tapestry of doubt around every sparkling thread of hope. I don't know if I can trust you, I finally admitted, my voice trembling as fear burst forth unbidden, spilling out into the charged atmosphere between us. It was raw and visceral, the very foundation of my anxiety laid bare. How do I know you're not just playing some sick game? As the words spilled from my lips, I could see something flicker in his expression. Confusion, perhaps. But beneath that, a shadow of hurt that struck me like a dagger. My heart sank further, knowing my fear had injected doubt into the fragile connection we were beginning to weave. For a moment, silence enveloped us, thick enough to choke on. The slightest crackle of tension hung in the air, and I felt my own breath stutter in my throat. I had wanted to embrace this unexpected possibility, to see him as my ally rather than my captor. But the ghosts of my past whispered caution, reminding me of the betrayal I had endured before. The way the world used to feel safe only to crumble in an instant echoed back to me with a chilling intensity. I could feel the warmth slowly draining from his gaze, and suddenly he seemed smaller. The confidence that had radiated from him now reduced to something vulnerable and fragile. "I'm not playing any games, Sarah," he finally replied, his voice tight, edged with frustration. "This is real for me." His words cut into the air between us, igniting a conflict that I hadn't anticipated. My heart raced at the shift in his tone, a mixture of anger and hurt, as if my doubt had ignited a fire between us that was as destructive as it was illuminating. I ached to reach out, to mend the rift that was widening, yet I remained paralyzed by the weight of my fear. I could feel the walls I had painstakingly constructed rising once more, and that familiar, suffocating darkness threatened to envelop me. "I don't know what's real anymore," I whispered, the weight of the truth crashing down on me like a tidal wave. The rage that had flickered in his eyes faded, replaced with a look of resignation that felt even more painful. I could see him struggling to hold on to his composure, the emotions swirling within him like a storm. "My entire existence has been a lie, and then you come in, out of nowhere, offering something I'm terrified to accept." Tears threatened to spill at the corners of my eyes, but I held them back. unwilling to let him see how deeply his words had hurt me. His hands slipped from mine, breaking that fragile connection, and I felt the chill of separation crawl through my veins. A deep silence settled between us, heavier than before, as if the universe itself had shared in our discontent. I watched as he turned slightly, the haunting pain of misunderstanding creeping into the spaces where once there had been hope. I wanted to reach out, to tell him that I was scared, that I craved the connection he offered, but couldn't shake the fear that his intentions might become yet another tool of betrayal. But the words lodged in my throat, tangled in the emotions that spiraled dangerously out of control. In that moment, I realized that the very thing I craved, connection, understanding, was now slipping through my fingers, caught between the jagged edges of my past and the uncertain promise of the future. I was haunted by the fear that I might ruin something beautiful, that my vulnerability might shatter the delicate foundation we had begun to build. I took a deep breath, feeling the silence wrap around me like a shroud, and in the depths of my turmoil, I understood that this conflict wasn't only between him and me. It was a battle within myself, a war waged between hope and fear, freedom and captivity. The silence hung heavy between us, fractured only by the echoes of our unspoken fears. I could feel the tension like a taut wire, one wrong move threatening to snap the fragile connection we had begun to forge. But just as I prepared to reach out, to mend what had started to fray, an ominous sound ripped through the distant stillness, a muffled thud, followed by an insistent rattling at the door. The world outside our fragile bubble of connection shattered in an instant, sending a wave of panic crashing over me. I could see it in his eyes as well. Instant dread replaced curiosity, and the darkness that had receded now surged back to strangle us. "Stay quiet," he hissed, his voice urgent yet shaky, as he instinctively moved to block the door. His body was tense, every muscle coiled like a spring, ready to react. I could feel my heart racing, driven by a primal instinct to flee or hide. But the couch of fear settled heavily in my stomach, rooting me to the spot. What was happening? My mind spun, the shadows of my past clawing at the edges of my consciousness. The silence that once felt oppressive now vibrated with an electric intensity, the air charged with something sinister. I had lived long enough in darkness to recognize it. This was not merely a distant threat. It was a predator closing in, and we were its prey. As the rattling grew louder, accompanied by a low murmur of voices, I felt a cold sweat break out across my brow. I scanned the room, looking for any semblance of safety, a way out that didn't exist. My thoughts raced. They were coming for me. I could feel it in my bones. The very walls that had felt like they were closing in around us now felt like a trap, a cage waiting to ensnare us both. Panic thrummed in my veins as I realized I was faced with yet another layer of chaos, another potential betrayal, swirling ominously into our fragile moment of clarity. He edged closer, urgency sharp in his features, and I could see the tumult of emotions playing out behind his stormy green eyes. "They can't find you," he breathed, a desperate urgency quaking under the weight of his words. "Not now." But I didn't understand what he meant. I didn't grasp the gravity of this threat. I felt a flood of emotions, fear overwhelming me again, and I could hardly process it. This man who had offered hope just moments before was now racing against an unseen enemy, and I was helpless to stop it. Not again. I couldn't let myself slip into that familiar abyss, but the winds of fate were shifting, and control was slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. Suddenly, a loud crash resounded against the door, a forceful blow that sent adrenaline coursing through my body. I flinched. The noise reverberated deep within me, igniting the flames of my old fears. This was not just a shadow lurking at the edges of my life. This was a tangible threat, a very real danger that had the power to disrupt this moment of awakening, this tenuous connection that had begun to bridge the chasm of despair I had inhabited for so long. My heart raced with visceral terror. I could feel the tightening grip of memories I had fought hard to overcome, threatening to drown me in their icy grip once more. The door cracked under the pressure, and in that instant, I glimpsed my own reflection in his eyes. Fear, uncertainty, and an unyielding instinct to survive. The man kneeling before me was no longer just a possibility. He was now a partner in this storm, and we were in it together. I could see the resolve hardening in his demeanor, an unspoken understanding passing between us, binding our fates in ways I couldn't yet fathom. I wasn't just a prize anymore. I was a person, a survivor. And maybe, just maybe, this unexpected alliance could be the spark we both needed to fight against the darkness that threatened to consume us. As the door shuddered again, with a wrenching creak that echoed through the room like the death knell of our budding hope, I braced myself against the oncoming storm. I felt a surge of something deep within me, a flicker of defiance igniting against the backdrop of fear. I might have been trapped in a nightmare, but I was not helpless. With the faint taste of courage rising in my throat, I prepared to face whatever lay beyond that door, ready to reclaim not just my identity, but the power within me, as the echoes of my past merged with the promise of a fierce future. The door shuddered one last time, and then silence enveloped us, thick and palpable. My heart raced as I stood frozen beside him, the remnants of fear swirling in my chest like a tempest. I could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on both of us, a suffocating shroud that threatened to suffocate the glimmer of connection we had forged just moments before. It was as if the world outside our fragile sanctuary had been put on hold, and the shadows danced ominously around us, waiting for a moment of weakness to pounce. We stood together, side by side, drawn into each other's orbit by a magnetic force neither of us could fully understand. The air felt electric, charged with the raw intensity of our shared vulnerability. I caught his eye, and in that fleeting glance we exchanged an unspoken understanding, an acknowledgement that, despite the suffocating fear and the echoes of despair, we were no longer alone in our darkness. It was a fragile alliance, but in that moment it felt like a lifeline. My breath hitched in my throat as I realized how tightly our fates had intertwined, rooted in a shared reality that neither of us could escape. Despite the pounding of my heart, I felt a sense of determination stirring within me, resonating with the strength I had long thought lost. Standing shoulder to shoulder with him, I found solace in the warmth of his presence. He was no longer just the man who threatened my identity. He was a kindred spirit, caught in the clutches of chaos just as I was. I could see the trepidation etched across his features, a mirror to my own fears, yet within that turmoil lay the promise of something more, an unspoken bond that dared to defy the darkness that loomed. "Whatever happens," I whispered, the words trembling as they escaped my lips, "we face it together." It was a declaration born from the depths of my soul, a commitment that felt both terrifying and liberating. I felt the strength of that promise wrap around us like a protective cloak, binding us together against the chaos outside. I wanted him to know that I wasn't merely a victim. I was willing to fight for my life, for my dignity, and for the connection we had sparked in this desolate room. The fear was still there, lurking on the edges of my consciousness, but I was ready to channel it into something fierce and unstoppable. He nodded slowly, the gravity of my words resonating within him. I could see the flicker of recognition in his eyes, the unspoken acknowledgement that we were both standing on the precipice, ready to take a leap into the unknown. In that shared silence, it felt as if we were carving out our own space in the world, transcending the circumstances that had brought us together. It was a testament to the strength we could find in shared vulnerability, the resilience that blossomed in the most unlikely of places. I felt an overwhelming sense of resolve wash over me. We were two lost souls, forging our own path, bound together by the threads of our shared pain. As moments stretched into eternity, the world around us faded, and the weight of uncertainty became a backdrop to the raw connection blossoming between us. It was no longer just about survival, it was about reclaiming our identities together. In the quiet spaces of our shared fear, I felt the stirrings of hope transforming into something far greater than the sum of our individual struggles. We could be more than just two broken beings navigating a dark existence. We could rise from the ashes and redefine what it meant to truly live, to love, and to be free. And as I stood there, my hands trembling yet resolute, I realized that our journey had only just begun. Together, we would face the tempest outside, armed with the knowledge that we were no longer alone in our fight. With every heartbeat, I could feel the flicker of hope growing stronger, intertwining with the strength of our connection, fueling the fire within me that dared to believe in a future worth fighting for. We would face whatever lay ahead, not just for ourselves, but for the very essence of who we were. In that moment, we were alive, and we would not be silenced again. I had once been someone entirely different, a girl with dreams that reached for the stars, not shackled to despair. I grew up in a suburban neighborhood where laughter echoed through sunlit streets, and childhood felt like an eternal summer. My parents, in their way, taught me the importance of kindness and hope, instilling in me a sense of belonging that cradled my spirit. I remember the way my mother would brush my hair, laughing as I squirmed under the tickling fingers, a ritual that felt sacred. Those moments became the bedrock of my identity, a foundation built on love and safety. But as I grew older, those idyllic days faded, overshadowed by the encroaching reality of the world around me. It started innocently enough, a friendship that blossomed in high school, young and full of promises. He was charming, with a smile that could melt glaciers, and he showed me the kind of affection I had dreamt of. In the dizzying whirlwind of first love, I became entwined in a narrative that spun faster than I could comprehend. He whispered sweet nothings, painted grand visions of our future together, yet beneath the surface simmered a darkness I chose to ignore. When he introduced me to his world, I felt invincible, a cocoon of passion that bled into obsession. I believed in the fairy tale until the truth shattered the illusion, and my dreams were replaced with nightmares. The first slap caught me off guard, a jarring wake-up call that reverberated through my carefully constructed reality. I had never imagined love could be so cruel, nor that I would find myself trapped within its grasp. I fought to reclaim my worth, but as the blows became a twisted language of love, I shrank into a shell of who I once was. Leaving felt impossible. The echoes of my laughter echoed like ghosts in the corners of my mind, reminding me of the girl I used to be. Isolation wrapped around me, squeezing the breath from my lungs until that familiar panic coursed through my veins. My identity was slipping through my fingers like sand, each moment spent in silence, further rooting me into despair. Then came the day I made my choice, the choice to escape. I ran away in the dead of night, driven by survival and desperation. I thought I could outrun my past. I believed that stepping into the unknown would release me from my chains. But fate had other plans. I found myself swept into a world I had only glimpsed in nightmares, thrust into the clutches of a dark existence where cruelty ruled. I became a whisper of a girl, lost in a cacophony of voices echoing through an underground network drawn from the ruins of broken souls. The strings of hope frayed, and I felt my identity fade with each passing moment as I was stripped of autonomy, reduced to a price tag. And now, here I was, bound in a rickety chair, the shadows of that life still clinging to me like a funeral shroud. I hadn't just been sold, I had been dismantled piece by piece, my essence bartered for profit, my name forgotten in the dark corners of misery. Yet here he was, kneeling before me, offering an unexpected proposal that sent shockwaves through the remnants of my shattered reality. The absurdity of it both terrified and intrigued me. Could I really be more than just a victim? Was it possible to reclaim the girl who had twirled in that sun-drenched field? The flicker of hope ignited a surge of defiance within me, urging me to embrace this chance, no matter how improbable it seemed. In that moment, with his stormy green eyes locked on mine, I realized that the power of my identity still dwelled deep within me, waiting to be rediscovered. I had to believe that my name, the very essence of who I was, could once again be a source of strength rather than a reminder of despair. As the darkness loomed, the bond we had formed in those fleeting moments whispered promises of a future yet unwritten. Perhaps this man, this unexpected declaration, could lead me back to a life where laughter and dreams intertwined harmoniously, a life where I could emerge from the shadows, ready to reclaim the narrative of my existence. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but within me bloomed the courage to rise, to fight, and maybe, just maybe, to love again. As the echoes of that moment reverberated within me, the air felt charged with an unspoken intensity, almost unbearable. We were on the precipice of something extraordinary, yet just as I began to feel the warmth of hope, the door burst open, and chaos erupted into the dimly lit room. The world outside had clawed its way back into our fragile sanctuary, sweeping in like an uninvited spectre. The sound of boots thudding across the concrete floor shattered the moment, sending icy tendrils of fear coursing through my veins. It was no longer just a ringing silence between us. It was a cacophony of threats, looming with the promise of violence. His body instinctively moved in front of me, a human shield against the encroaching chaos. I felt the heat radiating from him, a pulse of courage and defiance that clashed against the cold reality closing in around us. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice steady but laced with urgency. But I was no longer a passive figure, waiting helplessly in the shadows. This was my life, my fight. The flicker of hope ignited something deep within me, urging me to reclaim my agency rather than cower under the weight of fear. I stepped forward, glancing past him to the doorway, my heart pounding with the chaos that threatened to swallow us whole. The room erupted as figures stormed in, clad in dark clothes and obscured with masks. They filled the space like shadows, and I recoiled instinctively. In that moment, when the world felt like it was crashing down around us, I locked eyes with him, our gazes colliding with a fierce intensity. It was a silent plea, a promise that we would face this together, no matter what horrors lay ahead. I could feel the shared weight of our hearts, tethered by the fear we both fought against. He reached for me, his fingers brushing against mine, a lifeline in the torrent. We were two souls standing against the darkness, and for the first time I felt the strength of that bond illuminate the shadows that threatened to consume us. But then, a sharp voice sliced through the chaos, commanding authority with a palpable menace. "Where is she?" They were searching for me, hunting me like prey, and the implication rattled through my bones. I could sense the tension coiling tighter, wrapping around us like a noose. I felt the knot of fear tighten in my throat as the memories of my past flooded back. The terror of being hunted, of losing myself to a fate I could not control. I was suffocated by the weight of despair, but there was something different this time. I was not the frightened girl who had been sold. I was a survivor, ready to fight back, to reclaim my existence. In that moment, I felt the energy shift. My heart raced, and without a second thought I moved to stand beside him, our shoulders pressed together, a united front against the chaos. The figures advancing toward us only amplified the fire within me, igniting a desperate determination. "You won't take me," I shouted, my voice stronger than I knew it could be, slicing through the tension in the room. The shock on their faces was palpable, but I could see the flicker of doubt in their eyes. It was a fleeting moment of power, but it was enough to shift the tide, enough for me to rally the courage I had fought so hard to reclaim. Just as one of them lunged forward, intent on dragging me back into the depths from which I had fought so hard to emerge, the bond between us ignited like a wildfire. He stepped into the path of danger, his body merging with mine as he shielded me, and in that heartbeat I felt something surge within the both of us. "You're not alone," he whispered fiercely, his words a mantra that held us steady against the storm that threatened to tear us apart. The ground beneath us trembled with the weight of uncertainty, but in that ferocious moment, surrounded by chaos, I realized our bond had been tested in the fires of despair and emerged stronger, forged in the heat of shared struggle. The darkness and danger may have been palpable, but they were no match for the tenacity we found in each other. Whatever the outcome of this moment, we had chosen to stand united, and with that choice came an undeniable strength. As I stood beside him, our hearts beating as one against the encroaching shadows, I felt the flicker of hope burn brighter than ever, illuminating a path forward through the chaos. Together, we would face whatever fate awaited us, not as captives, but as survivors, ready to seize our own destinies. Time seemed to stretch into eternity as chaos enveloped us, but in the midst of the thunderous noise, I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. It was a peculiar sensation, the realization that I had reclaimed a piece of myself I thought was lost forever. Standing beside him, our shoulders pressed together, I felt fortified by the bond we had forged in those fleeting moments of vulnerability. I was no longer simply a captive. I was a willing participant in a fight for my life, and I could feel the embers of resilience igniting within me. The shadows may have loomed large, but they no longer defined me. This was my story, my moment to rise. With every ounce of courage I could muster, I took a small step forward, defiance radiating from my core. I could see that momentary flicker of uncertainty in the eyes of our attackers, and I seized the opportunity. "You think you can take me?" I shouted, my voice surprisingly steady amidst the chaos. "I'm not going back to that life." The words felt like an incantation, both terrifying and liberating. I was echoing a resolve that had thrummed beneath the surface, waiting for this moment to break free. The grip of fear tightened, yes, but it was accompanied by a fierce determination that surged through me like lightning. As if sensing my shift in energy, the man standing beside me tightened his grip on my hand, a silent affirmation that we were united in this fight. We were two warriors standing tall against a storm, and with each passing second, I felt the weight of uncertainty begin to lift. "Stay close," he murmured, and in his voice I found solace. I could face whatever fate had in store for us, provided we remained together. That thought flickered like a beacon amidst the encroaching shadows, illuminating the path forward. I glanced at him, and in that moment I saw not just a captor, but someone willing to fight alongside me, a partner beckoning me to reclaim my identity. The figures advancing on us hesitated, uncertainty painting their faces as they weighed their options. Seizing the moment, I stepped forward, anchoring myself firmly in the present. I could feel the rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins, spurring me on. "We're not afraid of you," I called out, my heart pounding. The resolve deep within me blossomed into a fierce fire, breaking through the chaos. The man beside me mirrored my defiance, his presence a grounding force amidst the storm. Together, we had forged not just a connection, but a pact, a promise to stand together in the face of despair. In the end, it wasn't the words we exchanged that defined our bond, but the silent understanding that grew between us, forged in the fires of hardship and resilience. As the dust settled, the attackers retreated, the ominous figures shrinking back into the shadows. I felt the weight of uncertainty slip slightly from my shoulders, and in its place blossomed a tender sense of empowerment. I could feel the sun breaking through the darkness, illuminating the path ahead. As we stood against the backdrop of our shared struggle, I finally understood that my identity was not defined by my past, but the choices I made in the present. I was stepping into the light, unshackled and alive. This experience had taught me that strength thrived in vulnerability, that hope could flourish even in the darkest of moments. I realized that the girl in the sun-drenched field had not disappeared entirely. She had merely been buried beneath layers of fear and trauma. But she was still there, echoing within me, refusing to be silenced. I embraced the lessons learned on this tumultuous journey, the importance of standing tall, the power of choice, and the undeniable presence of love that emerges even in the face of chaos. As we stepped through the threshold of that dim room together, I felt lighter, unbound by the chains of my past. The warmth of his hand in mine reminded me that I was not alone. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was ready to embrace it all. Not just for myself, but for the girl I had once been, and for the woman I was becoming. My name was Sarah, and it would be the bridge that carried me forward into a future filled with possibility, love, and the relentless pursuit of freedom. The dust settled, and with it, a heavy silence enveloped us. My heart raced as I took in the aftermath of the chaos that had just unfurled, a whirlwind of fear and courage, where shadows crept back into corners and uncertainty hung in the air like a thick fog. The world beyond our makeshift sanctuary felt vast and threatening, yet I stood rooted beside him, a tether to the reality I had desperately fought to reclaim. In that moment, I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears, a constant reminder of my existence, of my will to fight against the suffocating darkness that had tried to erase me. As the adrenaline faded, the weight of what had just transpired crumpled over me like a heavy quilt. I felt the cool air brush against my skin, a subtle contrast to the heat of panic that had coursed through my veins. I glanced up at him, our eyes locking in a silent exchange that held the essence of everything we had just experienced. Fear, determination, and an unspeakable bond forged in the fires of adversity. I had never expected that a man who once felt like a captor could evolve into something so crucial, a companion in my quest for survival. It was strange, this connection, yet undeniable. We were two souls entangled in a dance of survival, a partnership that felt both instinctive and powerful. "We did it," I breathed, the words spilling from my lips, tinged with disbelief and exhilaration. It was a simple acknowledgement, yet it held the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. In that fleeting moment, I was reminded of the small victories that had once felt so distant. The laughter of my childhood friends, the warmth of my mother's embrace, the dreams I had once held close. They were not just echoes of the past. They were reminders of the girl I was destined to become again. The flicker of hope ignited within me, a stubborn flame refusing to be extinguished, and I could feel it spread through my chest, filling the empty spaces that had long been filled with despair. He smiled at me then, a hesitant yet genuine expression that mirrored the flicker of hope glowing within me. In his stormy green eyes, I saw something undeniable: compassion, understanding, and perhaps even a hint of yearning. "You're stronger than you realize, Sarah," he said softly, his voice steady and resolute. Those simple words wrapped around my heart like a balm, soothing the raw edges of my fear and reminding me that I was not alone in this fight. The realization washed over me like a tidal wave, breaking down the barriers I had erected for so long. I was capable of more than merely surviving. I was ready to embrace life, to redefine my narrative, and reclaim the fragments of my identity that had been scattered across the chasm of despair. In that moment, as the darkness receded and the taste of freedom lingered in the air, my heart swelled with possibilities. The weight of expectation began to lift, and I could feel the embers of my former self stirring to life. I thought of the proposal he had offered, a proposition that had once felt absurd, yet now blossomed into something more profound. An invitation to embark on a journey together, one that transcended fear and embraced the beauty of raw vulnerability. Love, I realized, was not merely a fairy tale written in the stars. It was an act of courage, a commitment to stand together amidst the chaos. And it was something I was willing to explore, to nurture within the depths of my being. As we stepped through the threshold of the room, I felt the promise that lay before us, a path filled with uncertainty, yes, but also with the flicker of hope that had ignited deep within me. I was no longer just a lost girl. I was Sarah, a woman ready to reclaim her identity, her future, and the very essence of what it meant to love and be loved. I glanced over at him, our hands still clasped together, and I could feel the electric connection pulsing between us, the silent acknowledgement that we were now partners in this dance of life. Together, we would face whatever challenges lay ahead, not as captives, but as souls determined to rise from the ashes of our pasts. In that moment, I understood that my story was once again being rewritten, and the ink was flowing freely, painting a future filled with light and possibility. As we stepped into the world beyond those concrete walls, I felt the warmth of the sun on my face, a reminder that hope could pierce through even the thickest darkness, illuminating the way to a life worth living. I was ready to embrace every moment, every challenge, and every joy that awaited us on this journey. With newfound strength and courage, I knew that I was not simply moving forward. I was reclaiming my life, and this time I would write my own ending,